Western Sydney has long been considered the heartland of soccer in Australia. The first ever game of football played in New South Wales was back in 1880 between the King's School and the Wanderers in the Western Sydney suburb of Parramatta. Throughout the history of the NSL, the Western Sydney region had been represented by a number of clubs, including Blacktown City, Canterbury Marrickville, Marconi, Parramatta Eels, Parramatta Power, Penrith City, Sydney Olympic, who are now based at Belmore but did spend some time in the Sutherland Shire, Sydney United 58 and Western Suburbs. A host of Socceroos have also hailed from Sydney's west, including Harry Kuehl, Mark Schwarzer, Tony Popovich, Brett Emerton, Matt Ryan, Miller Jedinak, and Mark Milligan, and that's just naming a few. And while it is now the home of the Western Sydney Wanderers, and I guess Macarthur too, it took 7 years for the region to get an A-League team, and that was after one failed expansion team that never played a game, the Sydney Rovers. As you can guess by the headline of this video, that's who we're looking at today. But before we jump directly to the Sydney Rovers, we need to look at some history. Of course we do. It's one of my favourite things to do on this channel. The Western Sydney region was regarded as a potential location for one of the founding A-League clubs in 2005 and had originally been intended to be Sydney FC's base, with Football New South Wales, the team's backer, wanting Parramatta Stadium as the home ground. But after Sydney FC won the licence, FFA chairman Frank Lowy forced a number of changes to the bid and moved the Sky Blues to the Sydney Football Stadium in the city's eastern suburbs. Lowy reduced Football New South Wales' involvement from 100 to 25%, and his son David Lowy was installed as a major investor. It resulted in Football New South Wales walking away from Sydney FC altogether. Sydney FC is no longer the people's team, said one Football New South Wales insider to the Sydney Morning Herald. It may as well now be called Sydney City. It was a not-so-subtle dig at Lowy, who was once heavily involved with the NSL heavyweights Sydney City. With Sydney FC's acceptance into the A-League, it received a 5-year exclusivity clause over the city, giving the Sky Blues free range for that time. But in 2008, with only a few years left in the clause, bidders from Sydney's West emerged looking to get a spot in the A-League. In June of 2008, the FFA had received bids from two consortiums from Western Sydney. The bids were understood to be from the Nepean Football Association, the governing body for football in Penrith, the Blue Mountains and Hawkesbury, and a corps of local businessmen, with a level of involvement from the Penrith Panthers Rugby League Club. Then Panthers CEO Michael Leary said a new Penrith A-League club had the full support of the Panthers and that they would be happy to offer Panthers Stadium as a host venue for the proposed team. The second bidder was rumoured to be favouring Parramatta as a base, with Parramatta Stadium obviously long considered as an ideal location to host an A-League franchise. By August 2009, and a month out from the decision on the next team, the bidding process had evolved to include 3 teams from Western Sydney and 1 from Canberra. The bid leading the race to become Sydney's second A-League team was headed up by chairman Ian Rowden, a former NSL player, with the owner to be John Messina. Messina's bid had generated the most comment of the 4 bidders, partly because it was one of the first bids to show its hand, but also Messina's association with the Love Boat scandal that rocked New South Wales Labor in the early 1980s. Messina's infamy reached its height when it was alleged senior Labor Party figures had consorted with organised crime figures and a prostitute aboard his boat, the Kansan. Back to football, despite the time constraints with Melbourne Heart being confirmed a year ago, Rowden was confident of making up lost ground. The moment the FFA makes the decision, we'll be ready to go, he said. We've already developed the name, the colours, the structure. In September 2009, the 12th licence for the A-League was officially awarded to Rowden's Greater Western Sydney Football Group, which was not the Messina bid. It also beat a rival bid called the Sydney Wanderers, which had involvement from the Socceroos captain Lucas Neal and former New South Wales Planning Minister Craig Knowles. The winning bid would ultimately be headed up by the previously mentioned Rowden, as well as a marketing boss, John Moore, former Socceroos captain Charlie Yankos and Peter Tredenik. While the FFA wanted the competition to expand to 12 teams from the 2010-11 season to avoid the awkwardness of a bye, it admitted that the Western Sydney team would not be ready for the deadline. It meant Melbourne Heart would join in the 2010-11 season, leaving the competition at 11 teams. FFA CEO Ben Buckley said the rationale for delaying Western Sydney's entry was to ensure it had adequate time to avoid any potential hurdles. We wanted to give this team every possible chance to succeed, Ben Buckley said, and by starting in 2011-12, we believe that will give the team and the club the necessary time and opportunity to put all of the building blocks in place to make it a success. Western Sydney continues to be an important region for the FFA. It is the heartland of football in New South Wales. It is one of the most popular football regions in the country, and we've always said we've wanted to have an A-League team to represent the Western Sydney region. By early October, the bid's name was revealed to be the Sydney Rovers, as well as its underwhelming logo. The club would also play in red, white and black. Interestingly, the name Rovers had beaten out Rangers and the Wanderers. Rowden would later tell the SMH that month that the Rovers had the potential to be the biggest club in Australia. This club deserves to be and will be the biggest club in Australia, he said. It has to be competitive in the most competitive sporting market in Australia, and one of the most competitive in the world. There's an enormous catchment of fans out there, and they deserve a world-class club. In February 2010, the Rovers would embark on a listening tour of Western Sydney. We think this is a critical part of marking our club different to the others. We want to get off on the right foot, Rowden said. Within the next 3 months, the Sydney Rovers expected to make a decision on a home stadium. They were tossing up between Penrith and Parramatta. They were wanting to sign off a $20 million state-of-the-art headquarters. They wanted to finalise their list of investors, appoint a chief executive after a global search, and produce their first merchandise. But news went quiet on the Rovers in the coming months, and rumours began to circulate whether the club would be ready for the 2010-11 season at all. And the worst news possible for the bid came on December 10, 2010, when the FFA announced that the Sydney Rovers would be scrapped altogether, with a shortfall of $3 million in funding. It had been a horror run for the FFA at the time, with Australia's bid to host the 2022 FIFA World Cup just rejected, while the North Queensland Fury would be withdrawing from the competition at the end of the 2010-11 season. Ben Buckley said in a statement, "We have mutually decided this week to move on so the FFA can explore other options with the view to starting a team in Sydney's West as soon as possible." Buckley said the FFA was committed to a second Sydney team with other investors. "We are convinced there is enough support out there for a Western Sydney franchise and is an important part of our vision for the Hyundai A-League," he said. The withdrawal of the Western Sydney licence was made more devastating as the GWS Giants team would be joining the AFL in 2012. It was a dreadful look that the country's heartland would be without a team in the nation's national soccer competition, while Australian rules football, a rather niche sport in the region at the time, would. But Western Sydney would ultimately get its chance in the big league. After the collapse of the Gold Coast United team at the end of the 2011-12 season, the FFA acted quickly to keep the competition at 10 teams. Western Sydney was given a spot in the competition ahead of the 2012-13 season, with the team to become known as the Western Sydney Wanderers. That concludes today's video. Thank you once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, why not hit that subscribe button and like the video? It's completely free and helps grow the channel. We also have channel memberships. There's no pressure to join, but any support will help grow the quality of our videos and allow us to put out more of these video essays. We'll see you in the next one.